You're listening to Procurement 6, the weekly podcast from the team at Art of Procurement that summarizes this week in procurement in just 6 short segments.
Hi there, I'm Philip Heitzen, and today is Friday, January 27th, 2023, and a quick shout out to my son Aidan, who today is celebrating his 7th birthday.
6.
Bayer has developed and recently launched a supplier code of conduct, which sets forth key social, ecological, and ethical standards that the Bayer Group expects its suppliers and subcontractors to share, taking into account the 10 principles of the United Nations Global Compact as well as many other international standards. Bayer stated that the principles expressed in their supplier code of conduct comprise an important component of supplier selection and evaluation, and that they expect their suppliers to replicate these standards further down the supply chain. So today's tip is, if your organization doesn't have a code of conduct in place for your suppliers, or one that is easily accessible and understandable, then Bayer's is a great place to look for inspiration.
5.
This week on the Art of Procurement, I interviewed Vitas Slisaratis. Vitas has a diverse procurement background that includes time in procurement at Intel in his native Brazil, leading procurement at Google X, which is Google's R&D company, and global head of procurement at Epic Games, the makers of Fortnite. Vitas has recently been on a journey to complete an Ironman, and we discussed a number of learnings that he felt that procurement professionals can take place from that experience. But we also discussed his time setting up a procurement capability to support Google X, their moonshot factory, and how supporting innovation differs from traditional procurement approaches.
The aha moment at the time for us, Philip, was understand kind of a product life cycle, right? Which starts with an inception of idea. Then you build a prototype of that specific product. You test, then you launch, and then you commercialize or scale, right? So by understanding that life cycle, we're like, great. So all products here from Google X, or most of them, are going to be following through this cycle. So what our service offering from procurement, right, should actually be able to mirror, each of those stages. There would be a different offering or value add from our side. So think about the Waymo or Project Loan. You approach a supplier that may not offer a specific service or product that exists because those products are so innovative. Yeah. So a lot of what we have to do was to find and develop the suppliers actually to be ready to work with Google X, right? So we needed to adapt the agreements for R&D, which includes, again, IP clauses for intellectual property, confidentiality, and also scalability, because some of those products, again, would scale, right, drastically, and others, may not. So we needed to actually adapt the way the procurement worked. And then I think you touched an important point about the agility. We needed to be quick and fast. So I think one of the successes, part of the reason why we're successful there was to build the structure ahead of the need, right? Hire the people, build the processes, learn about the product life cycle, and then start to get those early wins with different products and project teams, and to then be engaged, much more frequently, right? So that's primarily what we've done.
4.
We continue to watch economic indicators here at Art of Procurement to help forecast the future trends for procurement professionals to look out for. One such indicator is the Philadelphia Fed and their January Manufacturing Business Outlook Survey. In this month's survey, they actually asked 2 special questions of interest to procurement that I wanted to focus on. First, they asked the surveyed businesses what percentage change in input costs they experienced in 2022 and what the expectation is in 2023. In 2022, as you would imagine, costs rose across the board, 10% on energy, 11.1% on raw materials, 9.5% on indirect products and services, and 8.6% on employee-related costs and wages. But for 2023, the expectation is for prices to continue to increase, but at a much smaller pace. 2.8% on raw materials, down from the 11.1%. 3.2% on indirect products and services, down from 9.5%. And 4.6% on energy. Now, these suggest that the expectation is that there's going to be a normalization in line with more historical rates of inflation. And from our anecdotal evidence, there is going to be significant deflation in some categories, while supply and demand issues continue to prop up other categories nearer their recent highs. The second question was to ask companies how important different factors were in actually setting their prices. And input costs and the desire to maintain margins actually ranked as the second most important factor, only below the strength of demand for the product or service in question, which continues to demonstrate the impact on procurement's ability to manage costs on company revenue.
This is Procurement 6 from Art of Procurement. To get notified every time an episode is published, go to artofprocurement.com/subscribe. 3.
Friend of the show and AOP alumni Embry Davis of Procurement IQ ran a poll on LinkedIn this week that piqued our interest. Embry asked, what percentage of RFPs would you say procurement conducts already knowing what the supplier will be selected? The answers were, we never do that, 1% of answers. We rarely do it, maybe 10% of the time, 13% of respondents. We occasionally do that, about 25% of the time, so 1 in 4 RFPs we know who the supplier is going to be before we conduct the RFP. 35% answered yes to that. And pretty often, over 50% of the RFPs that we run, 51% say that that is the case, that's what they do. So that's right, when you look at that, we admitted as a profession that over 50% of RFPs are conducted already knowing what supplier will be selected. In fact, when you look at over 25%, then that combined is 86% of responses. So rather than any guidance or tips this week, I just think that this is a number that's worth dwelling on. Think of the wasted time on both the buyer, the stakeholder, and especially supplier communities of this fact. There are better ways and we must do better.
2.
What is the point in which payment terms become unfair on a supplier? It depends on the supplier. It's definitely a fair answer. A small business with limited cash flow could really benefit from those 14 or 30-day terms, while bigger businesses are often comfortable with 60 days. But what about 120 days? What about 200 days? Or even 360 days? Yep, that's right. An article from December that caught our eye this week told the story of an RFP issued by Keurig Dr. Pepper for PR agency work. It had an eye-watering 360-day payment term. Voxcom, a PR industry trade association, called this an egregious display of corporate bullying. As you may have guessed, the agencies then had the opportunity to buy down their payment terms by supply chain financing, and that was facilitated by a partner of Keurig Dr. Pepper. So I'm curious to the reasoning behind such payment terms. While procurement, I would anticipate, is not the decision maker in this, they will be taking the brunt of the impact in terms of finding a supplier and then managing that relationship. And you can be 100% certain that any providers will include a contingency for the cost of supply chain financing in their pricing that's larger than the amount that they'll actually have to pay for said financing, increasing the total cost on Keurig Dr. Pepper. Perhaps this moving around of money does provide a benefit for them in their accounting statements and commitments that are tied to these numbers that dwarfs any additional cost, but it's certainly not a great way to become a supplier of choice and all the benefits that accrue with strong supplier relationships.
1.
In our next AOP Live session on February 7th, I'll be joined by Wendy Stockholm, Chief of Staff, and Nick Pinkman, the Senior Cloud Manager at Vendor. Titled Stop Shadow Spend in Its Tracks with Improved Data Visibility, our conversation will focus on gaining visibility to spend habits and data for those categories with significant shadow spend. That's where purchases are often made at the individual level using a variety of purchasing channels, many of which do not inherently provide good purchase data. For our conversation, we'll focus on cloud software as a working example and answer live questions about the importance of centralizing workflows for managing spend and headcount, the different types of cloud savings procurement should pursue during contract negotiations, and what data procurement should have in hand before entering a cloud software negotiation. Finally, Digital Outcomes 2023, Art of Procurement's first multi-day virtual event of 2023, will take place on February 15th and 16th. We'll be taking on topics such as tech investment and innovation, digitally enabled user experiences, and cybersecurity. The full agenda is now available to view at artofprocurement.com/digital outcomes. Sign up in advance of the event and you'll have access to all of those sessions on demand as soon as they are complete. And to learn more about all of our virtual events, including the next AOP Live webinar and Digital Outcomes 2023, go to artofprocurement.com/calendar.
Thanks for listening. We'll be back next Friday at 6 a.m. U.S. Eastern Time. If you've enjoyed this pod, help us grow and tell your peers to search for Procurement 6 wherever they get their podcasts.